Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar from Reuters Events. We are talking about how to build a competitive claims customer experience, which is the key to customer retention in a digital era. I think we've all learned that lesson over the past several months, and it is here to stay. So I'm Brian Falchuk. I'm your moderator today. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the book series, The Future of Insurance: From Disruption to Evolution. And I am joined today by Laurie Pierman, who is Vice President of Claims Operations for Amerisure. We have Andy Grohman, who joins us as VP and Customer Success Leader for U.S. Insurance and Financial Services from IBM, and Don Jones, who is the Head of Claims for MassMutual U.S.'s insurance operations. So welcome to our panel today, and to all of you for joining in. We have a nice mix-up of ways for you to interact. We will have some poll questions, so watch for those. And we also will have quite a bit of time for Q&A at the end. What I would ask is listen and come up with those questions, and don't wait to submit them. There's a little Q&A button right at the bottom of your screen. You can pop those questions in at any point, and we will do our best to get to as many audience questions as we can from across this whole panel and the last part of this webinar. So make sure you put your questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, and don't hold back, ask away. That's what we're here for. So with that, Laurie, I might turn to you to open things up and share some thoughts about your claims customer experience, the impact on retention, and just with all the digital push that's been going on, and no doubt will continue to. What's your take on that, and how are things playing out at Amerisure?
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate being here and look forward to talking with everyone today. So, it really is an exciting time to be part of our industry. It was an exciting time prior to 2020, but I think 2020 really accelerated the excitement and accelerated the need for carriers to really evolve and meet the needs of their customers. And so I really see, and I've thought a lot about this with what I do and how I've approached this with my company. And there really are 5 keys to success that I see, some 5 key things that we've done to be successful in this area. And the first one is really understanding the customer journey. What is our customer journey, and what do we want it to be? What does it look like today? Where do we want to get to? And, there's a lot of things to consider when we're thinking about the customer journey, different lines of business, different personas, claim complexity, jurisdictions. There's a lot to consider. And so that putting all of that in perspective and understanding that is really important. The second key that I see as kind of being the next level down on that is once you decide where you want your focus to be in your customer journey, picking a couple of different areas, 1 or 2, because there's so much out there, narrowing that focus. Once you do that, is really understanding what are the technology solutions that are available in those spaces to help you, and really do a deep dive. It can feel a little overwhelming when you get started, but knowing where you want to focus helps you stay grounded and kind of works as your North Star to make sure that you're making progress on the things that you intend to make progress on, and really immerse yourself in those solutions. There's so many ways to do that. Webinars like this, the conferences that seem like a thing of the past that I'm truly hoping really start opening up. Different emails, vendors that reach out. There's a ton of different opportunities to learn more. So take advantage of those. The third thing that I would say is a really important piece is as you're doing that scouting and as you're looking into that, to partner with your IT business partners. You can't go it alone. IT can't go it alone to find solutions that come in because they don't know what the business problems are that are being experienced. And in the same way, it's really difficult for the business to go out and find solutions in a vacuum and in a silo. You need to work together to identify those solutions that not only solve the business problems, but also work with your systems, your architecture, your structures, all of that to make sure that it can be implemented seamlessly, and that you're looking at the solution that's going to fit holistically. The fourth thing I would say, in addition to partnering and talking with your IT business partners, is talk to your other business units. Right now, there's so many solutions that are out there that can solve problems for multiple areas in the organization. And I know our IT business partners love when we can find a solution that multiple groups can utilize. That reduces a term that I'm becoming very familiar with, technology debt, and allows much more, it's much more it's easier to support from a technology perspective. The other thing that I like about that is if you can find a solution that solves multiple business problems and works across your organizational landscape, you are much more likely to get funding, whether that is dollar funding or resource funding to get those solutions in. So where you can partner, I really do believe you become more successful in getting solutions implemented. And the last thing I would say, and perhaps this is the most important, is I think it is extremely important to remember, what is your corporate identity? What do you want to be? All of us have very unique corporate identities. There's things about us that make us special. That's why our customers come to us, and that's why we have the customers that we have. So as you implement technology solutions and as you create the customer experience, make sure that you don't lose that individual identity and the thing that makes your company special. Make sure those solutions tie into your corporate culture, and really doesn't change your culture, it enhances it. It enhances that customer experience. I think if you consider these 5 things, they really will allow your customer experience, your journey down this digital path, to be much more successful, and to be much more seamless, both organizationally, internally, and externally to your customers.
Those are great points. I mean, there's a very clear kind of emerging story in those 5 points about the openness to what your customers are actually experiencing and needing, being open internally to your peers, to your colleagues, to other ideas, and how to partner up on delivering them, but then keeping that core of like, well, why do we exist in the first place? What is it we're trying to tell the market we are, tell our customers we are, and serve them from a value standpoint, so that all this lines up and it's not just a bunch of different nice but unrelated things that may or may not come together. So great points, Laurie. I mentioned we'd have some fun with different ways of pulling in the audience. So we do have a poll. So we're going to put up the first poll question and get some thoughts from all of you. So the question is, how much are your customer expectations being shaped by their experiences in other industries? So the numbers are rolling in very quickly. It's still 100%. Oh, there we go. We've got a little variety there. Some people are moderate, but there's no question right off the bat, people are saying strongly, and we've heard this for years, but it really came to a head last year, and obviously still into this year. It used to just be the Amazonification of insurance, and now we also get the Netflixification and everything else that everybody does in all the other parts of their life. So I'm not surprised. We had about 85% saying very strong. One person, not at all. That's good. They're not feeling any pressure from the outside. So that's nice to see. All right, we'll lock that in very strongly. 86%, 13% moderate. So 99% of you are feeling it from outside to different degrees. Let's go to the next question and see what everyone thinks about this one. All right. Which aspects of the insurance value chain is most ripe or are most ripe for innovation? I was saying before we launched this that there might be a bias with all the claims folks on the panel and in the audience, but it's playing out. All right, so almost 90%. All right, there's a little bit of competition from some underwriting focused folks out there. I think it's not news to any of us that there has been a much longer investment cycle in the underwriting side and the rating side, and some of the analytics around there, and claims has often been said to be, doing fine, so we'll leave it be, until last year, where there was a pain from that. So just about 3/4 of the folks on the webinar called out claims in particular. Andy, your perspective at IBM, looking across insurance and financial services more broadly, and everything that IBM sees, which is quite broad. What's your take on this? Are these two poll questions kind of aligning with what you guys are seeing? What's your experience?
Oh, absolutely, Brian, 100%. And thanks for having me on this panel today. Yeah, influence from other industries is very, very strong. We see a lot of different consumer behavior out there. And so, we wonder kind of what's changing, right? So data fundamentally is driving all of this, right? And data has always been the core of what insurance providers focus on, right? Actuaries, underwriters, risk pool managers, everyone throughout the industry. Frankly, the industry set the bar for how to manage data and build successful business models based on the way that data is managed. But what's changing now with, what the things we talked about relative to COVID, et cetera, I think people are becoming much more willing to share additional data than they ever have before, if that data, can turn around and provide additional value, right? Better experiences, right? So, whether it's sensors in your car, sensors in your home, for safe driving discounts or for monitoring weather warnings, security notifications, et cetera, I think you see a lot more integration of that data. And IBM, we've helped hundreds of customers, build transformative projects based on that kind of those kinds of changes in data behavior. Whether it's chatbots and digital assistants, whether it's new app experiences for consumers or adjusters. A poll taken before COVID was indicating that 85% of our insurance executives that we pulled over 1,000, were experimenting with this digital reinvention, right? So clearly COVID has already significantly accelerated that. Whether it's internal or external, whether consumers, how they interface with their insurance companies, or the way their adjusters, shifting to 100% remote workforce and how to maintain that productivity throughout. So with all this infusion of data, that's when it gets really exciting, right? So, we had one insurer who was offering a 25% discount for inserting these IoT devices in their cars. And what's interesting is unexpected benefits come from that, right? Parents start using it to monitor where their teens are. And so it's not just about safe driving, it's about, how do I keep my family safe? Or they end up collecting the data and feeding it into their local governments so that potholes could be fixed, because potholes were causing a lot of damage. In cases of kind of inclement weather, reroute a driver around a dangerous curve that was causing problems during rainstorms. So there's all sorts of different, innovative ways that this additional data can start to be used to avoid. And this all led to a 15% reduction in claims, right? And that's the best claim of all, right? When there's no claim. Another insurer in Canada was using it to provide real-time weather notifications, right? So move your car inside if a hailstorm's coming. That's a fairly basic example, but then it gets really exciting when you start talking about third-party integration. Whether it's at the very front end, you're buying a car and integrating, make that insurance policy available with the purchase of the car, integrating, Uber, car rental services, et cetera, at the time of a car accident to get people safe faster, or even integrating fraud detection throughout the adjustment process, right? So all this third-party integration is where all the data management gets really, really exciting. And I haven't even really touched on what AI can do throughout all this, right? So, you talk about it getting exciting. This is where the insurance industry shifts from the traditional kind of detect and repair mindset to the predict and prevent mindset. At least that's how McKinsey put it in an article they published last month. predicting how AI would impact insurance by 2030. So all of these fit into an intelligent claims solution that IBM puts together and helps our clients deploy. I think I'd categorize its benefits into three broad areas around easier, faster, cheaper, right? So it's easier engagement through those chatbots. It's better connectivity to those partners, simplifying the processes for our adjusters, driving earlier assessments, faster execution with automation, improved transparency, and then ultimately cheaper through that fraud detection I talked about, greater efficiency throughout the processes. So that's kind of how we've been approaching it. There's a lot of room for improvement, and we're excited to be on this journey with our clients.
That's great. Room for improvement, opportunity, however we want to couch it. There's room to make things better, and there are tools to do that. And I think you're spot on that there's this moment where data is more available. People are willing to share their data or engage differently through some of these new kinds of tools. And then there's having the data isn't really enough. You need to be able to do something with it. And there's definitely been an explosion of different ways to ingest and process and make use of a lot of the new ways of looking at an exposure than we've had before. Yeah, great points. And Netflix and Amazon have nothing on that because they're not making use of any of that data. Excellent. Don, can you share some thoughts from MassMutual's perspective?
Yeah, thank you. And good afternoon or good morning, depending where you are. Thank you for having me this morning. So listen, I listened to the conversation and, kind of reflect on those two poll questions. When I think about digital transformation, not only for claims, but also for the industry, it kind of begs the question of the what and the why in the business case. When you think about the insurance industry and how we historically have addressed innovation and really just injecting that innovation into our business model and our offerings, I think we can all agree that, the insurance industry is usually not the one that's breaking new ground. We're typically responding to, how the world is shaping around us in other industries. And I think that's probably more so true over the last, 10 to 15 years as just, more information has gotten more prevalent around our customers and our consumers, and then how their expectations have been changing. So it's no secret that it's been a long time coming. The digital transformation of the insurance industry is really now in full swing. And I would say nowhere is this more apparent than at the time of claim, particularly here at MassMutual. As with other industries, they've set new standards for customer service. You all have talked about that. Amazon continually is just like the gold standard. And you think about Uber and Airbnb and just all of the, other companies that are really just reshaping how the customer experience is being delivered. They quickly come to mind. And I usually call them, the digital bellwethers that we're competing against. It used to be that, insurers, whether you're a life insurer or P&C carrier, you were competing to demonstrate your value against, other companies that look like you, that were within your industry, but that's no longer the case. Because today's, digitally immersed consumers have grown accustomed to doing business anywhere at any time with any device and how they want to do it. And insurers need to do this really become more digitally, I would say, sophisticated to demonstrate their value to their customers. And with claims, we're looking to optimize the claims function by incorporating digital components, working through digital channels, automating the process. It's really important to meet customers' evolving expectations. Here at MassMutual, just for us, our claims vision is really, really simple. It's primarily centered on speed, efficiency, and transparency. We call it kind of our set vision that really delivers an exceptional personal customer experience. And the claims process is really pivotal because, when you think about it, once a policy has been written, the only time most insurance carriers come into direct contact with their customers is at the time of claim. And yet when that happens, the contacts are frequent and often intense. And that will largely shape the customer's view of the carrier and that customer's willingness to do business with that carrier in the future. And, mobile technology and all of the offerings is a good example really of how this is playing out. Numerous carriers now encourage policyholders to file certain claims via a smartphone or a tablet or another similar device. and using their smartphones can help customers navigate the claims process and really the insurance process, whether it's in operations or trying to buy a policy and trying to connect with their advisor very seamlessly. And one standout example of digital-friendly technology that I wanted to point out is really around data pre-fill, particularly at the first notice of loss. You know, from the policyholder's point of view, guided pre-filled forms are much easier to fill out and don't require chasing down a lot of information that in many cases the carrier already has. So using this information to provide pre-filled forms to its customers can send a very strong message that we know who you are, we're not wasting your time, and really the additional information that we're asking for here is really over and above what we already know about you. So, you know, digital transformation from a claims perspective, how we think about it, really generates impact across all of claims, and I would say probably other areas of the insurance business. Foundational key performance indicators, you know, when you can do it effectively and efficiently, you know, the benefits are increased customer satisfaction. You know, you deliver a more seamless and holistic experience. You find efficiencies throughout the process, and that's what we're really focused on. That can really add to reducing expenses. And I've seen, you know, articles and industry, you know, I would say information out there that suggests, you know, depending on which study you're looking at, that can reduce expenses up to maybe between 25 and 40%, and really improving claim handling accuracy. You know, pay what you owe. Nobody wants to overpay a claim. You don't want to underpay a claim, which invites different risks. And then when you think about just some of the studies and information that's just out there within our industry and, you know, the data, which is just so rich, you think about J.D. Power and their insurance customer satisfaction studies and how they kind of chunk that out. And really where it all boils down to just really having an effective omni-channel experience that leads to higher levels of customer satisfaction. And a digital claims process can do that. According to McKinsey, you know, having a digital claims process and transforming that value proposition can increase a carrier's efficiency by as much as 30%. And even breaking this down further, I think they've calculated just some of the offerings or the impacts of having a best-in-class customer experience can impact premium growth, can, you know, enable insurers to have 80% more likely to retain customers and have higher retention levels. And then also having impacts on a lower average expense ratio, which when you can kind of boil all of those into the equation, you have a favorable impact on profitability, where claims is in a position to really start to transform its value proposition into the equation for most carriers. So it's really, really hugely important. You know, I think we're on the precipice of really starting to make some great transformations within our process and how we engage with our consumers. And I just think it's going to be fun to see how this all plays out, both in the near and the long term.
Yeah, I think it's really well said. Don, you sort of threw out a call to action for everyone, or a moment of inspiration that I hope everyone caught. You said, you know, about the digital bellwethers that our peer set that in the customer's eyes we're being compared to. And this is not a personal lines or life health or versus PNC. This is universal.
Right.
It's not just the other carriers, the other even broader financial services ecosystem. It's everything. So who is digital? And that's where the expectation set lies. So if you're not seeing it that way, it's time to maybe change your viewpoint a bit, because that is how the consumption side is seeing it, and probably distribution as well. Because
Right.
your agents and your brokers and your advisors, they're all people who are interacting with these tools too. And they're not necessarily going to stand for a slower, painful process that stands in the way of their income and their ability to serve their customers.
Yeah, if I could add, Brian, also
Yeah.
onto that, you know, we haven't even touched on the demographic impact and how the demographics are shifting really, really in large volumes. And I don't have any numbers committed to memory, but when you think about how I think by the year 2035 or maybe 2040, maybe even sooner, I could be off with my data here. You know, the millennials and the generation, you know, Zs, the younger generations, they're going to make up a larger proportion of our customers and our consumers. And technology, as it continues to evolve, let's face it, it just makes the world smaller. It makes things easier. And it really creates a lot of, I would say, not pressures, but it also just opens things up from a consumer perspective and it consistently and constantly shifts what they need and how you can support those needs and supply those needs. So, I think we also have to understand who our consumers are and what they look like today and what they're going to look like into the future, because that's going to be a major consideration.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Thank you for that, Don. There are a couple of questions that have come in already. If this conversation has not already sparked some thoughts from you in the audience, think about it, because I know these points are resonating. There are things we're struggling with. The first question that came in was about some of these struggles with the new technology and what if it doesn't work out perfectly or it leads to errors that the customer sees. And we're going to get into that. But I know that everyone has been on this journey, either yourself on the carrier side or a provider or a customer or what have you. So I know there are thoughts out there that this conversation will spark. So please do submit those questions and those ideas in the Q&A. But before we get to that, we're going to have a little bit more polling fun. So if we can bring up the next poll question, let's see what everyone thinks. So what are the biggest barriers to insurers providing more seamless, customer-driven experiences? Is it your inflexible legacy systems, the data privacy concerns, investment hurdles and ROI? And perhaps because it's too politically sensitive, internal politics is not on the list, but maybe that's part of the investment hurdles and ROI there. Yeah, so the legacy systems are coming up, and an interesting point on the legacy systems, you may not have your legacy system anymore, or it's so buried in the IT world that it's not visible to the business, but the process of getting off of it cost a lot or was very painful or burned people, or they're tired from it, or that now there's a freeze on future investment or future changes for a while. So even if you don't still have the legacy system, you still have the sort of the cost of the legacy system with a tail for a while. So I see that come up. All right, so we got about 2/3 are talking about the inflexibility of their systems, and that could be newer systems as well, of course. But then 30%, so a good number, still feeling the investment hurdles and ROI. And I get that when you're talking about customer experience, because now you're talking a lot about customer lifetime value, and that may be a harder thing to prove out or it takes more data. Don, you brought up quite a few stats on the efficiency side. So the savings are still real. Even before we get to the ultimate benefit of increased retention, share of wallet, happier customers tend to have lots of other benefits along the way. Let's go on to another poll question if we can. All right. What are the biggest benefits of a digitized insurance experience? Is it improving the customer offerings and experiences? Is it operational efficiencies and driving down costs? Is it the speed to market at scale? All right, so the customer offerings and experience are pulling ahead. That's good because this was a CX themed conversation, but obviously, Andy, I think you'd sort of hit on all of these, right? The three things that you're looking for in any kind of technology and change investment. But improved customer offerings and experiencing, look, I think that's topical for what we've been going through in this whole conversation. Again, to Don's point, that's your competitive set. Don and Laurie, I'd love to get some thoughts from the two of you on the poll questions, and then we're going to dip into the Q&A. And Laurie, I'll start with you. Anything that this tells you about, or were the results surprising at all?
Yeah, no, it surprised me a little bit, the legacy systems, only because there's so many companies that have gone through that over the last couple of years, but I think that journey is continuing. Just when I think I've heard it all, I'll talk to someone and they're saying, well, we're getting off, some legacy, we still have legacy systems. And I think about where we've gotten and how that would be so limiting if you're talking about green screen claim systems, to be able to really have a digital offering to your customer. I thought it was interesting, the second question, what really jumped out to me there is, I agree, this is all for our customers. And at the same time, the operational efficiencies get tied to it, because the more that we can provide that digital service to our customers and the self-service component, you're going to drive efficiencies and you're going to improve that on the internal side as well. So I think it's nice that those two actually tie together as opposed to being in conflict. So that was what really jumped out to me, because when I was reading it, I was thinking of it the same way. I think the first goal is to get to the improve the customer experience, and then reap the benefits internally with having some improved efficiencies.
Yeah. And if we look at efficiency as a way to deliver that great claims experience to the customer faster, so they get happier sooner,
Yes.
that's a good thing too, right? There's more than just the dollar side of it, and becomes a virtuous cycle. Dawn, thoughts from you on that? Any surprises, or does it just reinforce the message you were thinking?
Yeah, no, it kind of reinforces it, and I agree with Laurie's comments. I think, from the legacy perspective, everybody's been chasing that challenge for a long time, and some are making, more progress than others, but it still remains to be a notable challenge that you have to deal with. And to your point, it may not be bogging down, certain advancements to some degree, because maybe you have a new claim system or you have another process that you've put in place. But I think the other thing that, needs to be considered, though, is that, and it wasn't maybe an answer that we probably should have maybe thought about offering to the audience, but it's just about the data too. While those legacy systems can weigh you down, just not having the right data, and really not having that data that enables you to really understand and lean out your processes in the most efficient manner. And I think that's really important too, because, we tried, not just here at MassMutual, but throughout my career, we've tried to introduce different variations of automation and technology and process improvements. And I just think it's really, really important that you understand your process, and you've really got to just understand your process. It's got to be matured out, and you have to have the data that makes you to be in a position to understand how you can really improve the process. And that is just so critical, because if your processes are really immature and you don't have the right data that you need, whether it's external data or internal data, that can be a hindrance in terms of really getting the right technology that you need and really leaning out your processes as effectively as possible. And then the introduction of AI and robotics and all of the other advanced technologies that we're all trying to kind of utilize to kind of really digitize the process. It's kind of a confluence of things that you really have to understand holistically, that's going to put you in the best position to take advantage of these various improvements that will get you to really provide that seamless experience to the customer. So hopefully that makes sense. But I just wanted to raise the point that the data piece is just so critical, because if that's lacking, that could be a huge hindrance. And Andy at IBM, I would be interested in his thoughts around that, because that's a challenge that we've had from time to time.
Yeah, and Andy, you opened with the data point. So I was going to go to the Q&A, but I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well.
Look, it's so critical. I mean, this is the modern currency that frankly, all of our businesses are dealing with. But, all of my insurance clients are in one form or another working through claims modernizations projects. I mean, it's universal. And how to embrace the data is driving a lot of that. So you're absolutely right, Don. And it has to go through stages. You have to start with organizing and understanding the data that you have available today. And of course, we have tools that can help you do that. But then you go through the process of after that data is organized, we call it that AI ladder, right? So you climb this ladder to reach the ultimate goal of being able to draw, AI models and machine learning models out of your data. But it starts with organizing that data and making sure it's all at your fingertips. And then it goes into integrating with third parties, right? I think we see a level of data sharing today. I talked earlier about how consumers are sharing more data, but businesses are sharing data, data they're allowed to share, of course, but they're sharing more data with each other, and that just further, improves the ecosystem to give that better experience, not just for end users, but for the employees as well, having that information at your fingertips. We talked about, I mentioned earlier, our digital chatbots, right? Our Watson assistants. We see just as much usage of that for customer-facing experiences as we do for internal-facing experiences, right? So whether I want to use a chatbot for a consumer to open a new claim or investigate a new policy, but also for the employees just to get access to data that can be sometimes hard to find in internal systems. And that's a really, really common use case.
Andy, you set up the question I was going to ask from the Q&A really well, because you brought up employees a couple of times, and that's not something we really touched on yet. And we have a question that's asking about this. So obviously it's a customer experience focused webinar, but who's delivering that customer experience? It's our employees. And having run a claims organization, I know firsthand, it's a very hard job. The person on the other end of that phone call or exchange probably expects some adversarialness from you, that you're, everything they've heard is your insurance company's not here for you. They're here to pay you as little as possible. Not to Don's point, it's about fairness, but the public perception is, oh, they're looking to pay as little as they can or just deny the claim. Whether that's true or not, oftentimes that's what comes in, and the person's gone through something terrible, so they're not in a great place to begin with. And then you have the claims handler who has lots of things on their desk or their screens that they're trying to manage, new things being thrown at them, or lots of old things that are restricting how they work, and the simplicity and pulling it all together. It's a tough job. So I think rightly so, this person's pointing out, well, what about the employee experience and how we're supporting them holistically in something that's more cohesive? I was share this story of an FNOL experience that I got to listen in on, and I saw like probably 5 or 6 different tabs in the browser, plus the core claim system, plus a couple of other systems. And the FNOL person was fantastic at hopping back and forth between all of it to look up where's the tow truck operator, to know like, oh, is your car in this town? As if, she lived there herself and she's never been there in her life, but just using all the different tools to give this seamless, brilliant customer experience that you could feel was putting the customer at ease. But that was a tremendous burden on that claims handler. So how do we think about the employee experience as they deliver that customer experience? And I'm curious, how have you guys looked at this? Are you seeing that as an issue? Does digital help? Does it hurt? Does it matter how you implement it? And then Andy, for you, I'll come to you last about how do we see that holistically across the industry and some of the ways we can bring it together so the employee is better supported in delivering that customer experience. Laurie, could you open us up with this?
Sure. Yeah, that is frequently a conversation that we have. I agree. The more data, the better. But at the same time, you have to be realistic. And, we can't, it's just not feasible. It's not realistic. And I think we have to be realistic in that. And it also take into account, what is the customer experience if they're being asked 50 questions, and just let me get my claim going. If it's not pertinent to them to get the claim going, is it needed? Is it needed at that time? So I think it's getting the information at the right time in the process, and also being thoughtful about what do you really need and what's a nice to have. I don't know. I would venture to guess that many on the call have had the experience where some of the data fields, it's not going to change the claim, but there's business partners going, it'd be really nice if you would get A, B, C, D, and E, because I don't know, and maybe it might be useful to us one day, maybe kind of sort of help us on the underwriting side. We don't really know, but could you just get it? And that's where I think we have to be we have to be more thoughtful and push back a little. And, maybe are there other technologies like a data prefill or, intelligent text ingestion that you can pull data off of other forms and get it in the system without having to burden the claim handler to get the information, find it, and input it. So I think that is a question that we struggle with, and there's a couple different solutions depending on, what it is and where that is coming from.
Yeah, that's a great point. Don, I saw you nod a couple of times. Does that fit with your thinking? You have some different things to add to that, or what?
No, absolutely. Laurie's spot on. I just also wanted to add that, from the associate or the employee experience, and we talk about that a lot here at MassMutual, and it's actually one of our 4 pillars as part of our strategy here in claims, just ensuring that as we are focused on the customer experience, we're equally as focused on the associate experience, because we all understand, how they're distinctly connected. So, for us, it's just really, when we're looking at the data, but also more importantly, trying to find those areas and those processes that are repeatable, that, we can lean out, that are non-customer facing, and those processes that we could maybe say, you know what, how can we do that work a little bit differently, more effectively, and take that off of the associate or the employee's plate. And when you do that, you put them in a much better position. And I know people think, well, what, to be more productive? Because, the old claims adage was that we built our processes and our business model so we can get higher levels of productivity out of our employees. And that may have been the case, 30, 40 years ago. But I think today our focus is on how can we remove those processes that can be automated, that are more back office support, if you will, and put our employees in a position where they can be providing most of their time and higher value levels of support to the customer where it really matters. And those interactions, when they're interacting with the customer, having conversations and guiding them through the claims process, that's where we want to have them mostly engaged, largely engaged, because that's where the customer experience is truly delivered and truly impactful. So I think you got to really think about, if there's something that's non-customer facing that your employees are doing today, how can you get rid of that? And if you can't get rid of it, how can you take it off their plate and automate it, or, strategically do something different with it?
Yeah, we have a question on empathy in a world where we're going more digital. And I think you're hitting exactly on that, is giving your people the space to provide empathy rather than process things, which is not, no one enjoys that over actually feeling like they're having an impact on the betterment of a situation. So that's a great point. Andy, some thoughts from you, from what you've seen, how are different carriers looking at supporting their employees in this CXification of insurance? Which you're on mute, so while you come off, I'll say that may not be a word, but if it, I'm going to have to trademark that.
We can go with it. I think we can figure out what you meant. I think you probably saw me nodding emphatically with what Don was saying there, because that was exactly the point that I wanted to make. So around the concept of automation and RPA, it should really be about freeing the employees to focus on the higher value that they can provide, right? Bring their intelligence and knowledge of the situation and empathy for the customers to delight, the end users. That's the rote tasks that can be automated. I think I watched a demo the other day where fully 75% of the tasks of a opening, processing a claim, from report to payment were fully automated, right? And so now the employee was left to handle on those other 25% where they could devote their time and drive that value back to the client, give them a positive experience in that time of need. That's what it's all about, right? It's that, to me, that's much more exciting than hearing, hey, I've implemented automation, I can get rid of 100 employees. Like, I don't really like having that conversation. I like having conversations that say our employees are smart, they understand our customers, they have a ton of great experience. And so let's put them in a position where they're constantly using that insight and not, just pushing paper from one pile to another.
Yeah, so I think that's well said to everyone here, and people are putting that in the chat. So it's definitely resonating with people, which is great. Don, I want to harken back to something that you mentioned. So we have a question about your point on pre-fills, and the question there is, has the claims real life experience lived up to the sales pitch? And maybe we can broaden that from just the pre-fill example. Happy to hear you speak to that specifically, but there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of tools, there's a lot of talk about what it can do. And, we've certainly had experiences in the past where there's a promise, maybe the way it's implemented or the scope or the way it's delivered doesn't necessarily bring us the same value, or something else happened and it changed our ability to capture that. How are we finding the ability to capture the promise of these things internally and maybe from the customer's view as well? So since you sparked this question, I'd love to start with you, Don.
In full transparency, I still think we have a ways to go in that space, not only, here at MassMutual, but also just as an industry. I think the information is there, obviously, and we still have to kind of work on when we have that information, whether it's at the underwriting process or the sales process, and particularly the first notice of loss process. How can we bring those universes together? So that way, when a claim does happen, like I said at the outset of my comments, that we demonstrate to the customer, to the insured, that we know everything about you, and we're not having them chase down information that we should already have. So I still think that we have a lot of work to do in that space, to be quite candid with you. And I also think that, when it comes to leveraging that information, I think it also can help during the claims process in just so many different ways, because when you think about the richness of the data that we may have, that we often do have, that we're not leveraging, and we talk about how we can really personalize the claims experience, right? Because again, for some customers, that's the first time or the next time that they've been in contact with the insurer since they've engaged in and gave us the privilege of having their business. And the only other time we engage with them is when they have to send in those renewal premium payments to keep those policies in force. And often say, when that happens, that's our ability. Every time we accept that renewal payment, that's our ability to renew the promise to them, that we're going to make to protect them and to protect the financial futures of them and their families. But I think that, just being able to use those pre-filled data and those fields really sets the claims experience up for success, because that's where it all starts. When they have a claim, let's face it, whether it's a life claim, whether it's a disability claim, that's the sector that I'm in now, but most of my career I was in the P&C space, auto and home, and when you have that claim that comes in, you're saying to the customer that we know you, we understand you, and we're in the best position to use the data we have to just really meet your needs. And I think that's the other piece too, because when you think about the beginning of the claims process, it's about what? It's about just really making it easy for the customer and having the process work for the customer, as opposed to having the customer work the process. That has been one of my fundamental frustrations during my entire career, that people have to chase us down for information, that we should be pushing out proactively and seamlessly. So, once they file a claim, that's it. Now, I'll share a very quick story. I won't mention the carrier, but recently I had my daughter had a little fender bender, first one. She's a young driver, no big deal, nobody was hurt. And again, I won't say the carrier, but from the time I reported that claim to the time that claim got to the body shop, I was getting instant communications every day via text. This is where the claim is throughout the process. This is what you can expect. Boom, I mean, daily. I did not miss an update every day. And the only time I interacted with them was getting those texts. I didn't need anything else, but certainly if I needed to call somebody to get further clarification, if I had a question, they were there. And, my car was ready in, I don't know, probably 14 days, over 2 weeks. And it was just such a seamless experience. And I came from a carrier, my former carrier, in that industry. Those are all of the things we were doing, just trying to make sure we can lean out our processing and build an experience where once they report that claim, they don't have to worry about it or think about it anymore. The process and the promise we're going to fulfill and live up to.
Yeah, I fully agree. Even just keeping them apprised, it's a little thing. And that's one of these burdens, I want to use the word burden, but it's one of the things we're asking of our employees on the claim side, just to handle the incoming calls from someone who's like, I don't even know what's going on. So think about that. The calls coming in, they're unhappy. What if you could push out information or give those same adjusters a tool that makes it easy enough for them to push out the information, so they're not fielding 20 incoming calls from someone who's unhappy, but allowing them to just push through those simple updates. 2 weeks sounds like a long time to me. I don't know the extent of the damage, but that sounds like a long time. But you didn't think so, or at least the way you're telling the story, it didn't feel like it because you knew where you stood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's so interesting. You see, even if claims take longer than the ideal, people are happier if we just keep them apprised simply and easily. Just like, the status on, I'm getting sick of this, but the Domino's pizza tracker thing, like that keeps coming up. Do you care if your pizza's 35 minutes instead of 30? Well, maybe because it's free then, but if you knew where it was and you didn't have to wonder about it, maybe that's fine. Anyway, we'll move to something healthier. But Laurie, what what do you think of it? So thank you, Don. What do you think about this?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think really focusing on making sure that the communication is timely, is consistent. But I think the other thing that really jumps out to me, and this is something I heard recently, is we keep talking about digitalization and communicating digitally and that self-service. But one of the things that I thought of, and this is, you know, we're in a commercial space, primarily workers' compensation is our lead line of business. And for the most part, you hope that someone doesn't have multiple work comp claims. Sometimes they do, but many times they don't. So that is an unusual experience. And there are times you need to allow those different channels. And that's where that empathetic employee comes into, providing them time to be empathetic, help someone walk through the process, because this isn't a normal process to them. This isn't something that happens to them every day or every year. And so I think allowing that opt-in for that more personal interaction is really important, and something that has to be considered when we think about these experiences. You know, I was saying, thinking about the customer journey and the personas, and really thinking through that, because there may be times that you want that face-to-face, or, you know, that direct communication versus just, you know, text messages. And there's times text messages work better. The other thing I would say, and I thought this was really interesting, is even generationally, someone said even, you know, their child who is totally tied to their phone, you know, young adult, totally tied to the phone, if when they have claims, they want to be able to talk to someone, because this is brand new. What do you mean my car is damaged? I don't know how to live without, what am I going to do without my car? What does that look like? I've never been through this before. And they tend to want to have the ability to have verbal conversations with someone to walk them through, for them to understand, because it is so new and traumatic. So I think I think those are things, it's a lot of balancing that we have to do, which I think in some ways just complicates it even more, because we have to have, so that's where coming back to, you have to have the right processes in place to allow for that, to allow time for our employees to be able to deliver that service however the customer wants to receive it.
Yeah. Another great. There's good quotes coming out of this webinar, so people are taking notes on
Hey,
this.
Brian, can I add to Laurie's point real quickly? I'll be very, very quick. I mean, she made a really good point. And the one thing that we didn't talk about is when you're thinking about your best practices that you develop for claims, I think we need to start being careful when we develop those best practices, not to be universal and holistic to every customer. You have to build flexibility into your best practices and your standard operating procedures that allows your associates and your claims team to meet the case-specific factors of each claim, and not to treat each claim as the same. Because if it's an auto claim or a homeowner's claim or workers' comp claim, or even medical claim to some degree, you know, sometimes we build these processes where we put our associates and teams in a position to treat everybody the same way, and not to have that view of what their specific client needs are and how we can best meet those needs.
Or if it's an 18-year-old or an 80-year-old, right? Those are very different experiences, the way they're going to interact with you. You need that omni-channel experience.
Yeah, Andy, I wonder if you can expand on the original question being about, you know, are the new solutions living up to the promise? We've had other questions come in that are sort of like, well, how do you set that up to live up to that promise? We're talking about some of the complications or the nuances to be aware of, like allowing for flexibility and not trying to fit everything in the box, or say, well, if it doesn't, now that, Don, to your point, like now the customer has to work the process, you know, when they're already in one of these extreme situations because they didn't fit your happy path. So it's like, it's doubly bad. Andy, how do we get to a place of better outcomes and make sure that the things we are building are, you know, are coming as close to the vision, or maybe even exceeding it because we weren't even aware of what was possible?
I mean, I think everyone knows the answer. That there's no easy answer to this. You got to roll up your sleeves and keep doing the work and keep iterating on it and keep improving on it, right? So no process starts out, meeting 100% of its objectives from day one. I mean, think to take a completely different example from what we've been talking about here, but just think of a manufacturing line, right? Everything is 100% fully automated, and there's still an error rate for things coming off that manufacturing line, right? The same, even more will be true with a human-based process such as this, right? So we have to continue to iterate on that, monitor it, right, and find ways to improve on the margins. And that's what our automation tooling can help you do. I think I would go back to one point I wanted to mention, the question that came up around empathy in the digitization process. And this is something we talk a lot about here at IBM, especially when we talk about infusing AI into our processes and building these machine learning models based on history. And we do a lot of work here at IBM, and I actually think we're pretty unique in the industry in making sure there's trust and transparency in all of the AI modeling that we do. When we infuse an AI model with data, it's always very clear where that data came from, and it's the client's data, not just generic industry data, and that results in models that are very customer centric, and it gives us ways to ensure that bias is being excluded from those models. Because that's a great way to blow up all your empathy, right? If that unconscious bias gets baked into those ML models. So we do that. That's a big focus for us here at IBM and the way that we're bringing AI to market.
And I mean, that's a reason why people, even with the best of intentions, may still miss something. And so it is this dual. It's not all technology, it's not all people, and it's not all one answer. For a person, it's the last 10 claims you saw influence how you're going to look at the next one. And if someone who looks and feels in your mind similar to that other person who is committing fraud, you may presume that even in the back of your mind. And so is that going to lead to how you handle things differently? Can a model help with that? Well, not if the model is built on all of those same biases, because it watched all those behaviors as well. So we have to be conscious with how we look at that. And it's inevitable. People have biases, no matter how sweet and kind and nice and open-minded they are. It's the nature of life, and we still have a limited data set from our own experiences. I saw one question that we only have 3 minutes, so this is going to be super rapid fire, but I'm curious, commoditization of the claims process. Does a world where we have all these tools and automated decision-making, is that where we end up? Or is this about that balance? And so it's about taking the commoditizable off of the plates of the people so they can engage in the real expertise and empathy pieces. Laurie, you're nodding, so you triggered my attention. I'll start with you, but is our world commoditized or commoditizing, or is it about balancing better?
I firmly believe it's around balancing better. I really do. I think at the end of the day, there is so much. A claim is a traumatic experience. I don't care what it is. And, could we never say never, right? Could we get to the day where AI has all those empathetic aspects to helping someone walk through the process? But the other thing I'm going to say, I think I agree with commoditizing areas of the claim process, but at the end of the day, it's going to be the people, because not every claim is the same. And I believe our customers are going to be expected to be treated as individuals and as people, and not, oh, you're just another back claim, or you're just another fender bender. No, but it's my fender bender. It's important. Yeah. So I really do believe that it's a balancing act, and I don't see this being something that our staff is going to go away.
Thank you. Don, concur? You're on mute. See, we haven't commoditized that yet.
Yeah, we haven't commoditized that yet. That is the term. You're on mute. I agree wholeheartedly with Laurie. I just think it's a balance for all of the reasons she stated. I think when you're talking about dealing with human beings and their problems, and I often say in claims, we're in the business of solving people's problems. You can commoditize certain pieces or parts of it, but you're still going to need the human piece that I just think machines can't deliver, particularly in that moment of truth. So I think it's a balance.
Yeah. Andy, final words from a company that is enabling a lot of that automation and digitization. Arguably it could be in your best interest if everything was to be fully digitized, but I'm love to hear
No,
your take.
I mean, I don't think that's realistic, but look at what we were doing 30 years ago versus what we do today, right? We've found a role for humans, and we're not moving paper around, and it's a completely different way to deliver insurance today than it was done 30 years ago, and it'll be completely different 30 years from now. But I agree, people will definitely still be involved in the heart of the process.
Good. Well, on that note, we are out of time. I will say the feedback from the audience, we don't usually get this live. Like the chat has been full of yes, 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 yes. I totally agree. And the last question we got was really smart panel here today. One of the best I've seen in a long time. So that's not a question, but I still felt like I had to read it. Thank you to everyone. Really excellent conversation. And I think very real conversation about what we're actually facing on the front line and how we're going through that change in respect of our customers and internally with our own people as well. And Andy, great view across the industry and thinking about from a technology standpoint. So thank you to Laurie, to Don, to Andy, and to all of you for tuning in. And I hope that this was informative and inspiring. You wrote down some of these quotes. It was great.